Hi, welcome to the Addiction Show. I have with us Gabrielle Glaser. She is the author of Her Best Kept Secret. This book has caused quite a controversy, and I love that. So welcome. Thank you so much for being on the Addiction Show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So the reason why I invited you was because I just happened to see you everywhere, it seems. You've been on HuffPost Live, NPR. Your book just came out in a paperback edition, which I have a copy. And you're just all over my social media. So you are pretty timely, to say the very least.
Well, thank you. I'm doing my best.
So why are you so controversial? What is the book about? Let's start there.
The book is about women drinking more than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the reasons why that is. And the rate of women's drinking and the rate of women getting into problems with their drinking has really increased substantially over the past couple of decades. And one of the reasons why is pretty obvious. It seems pretty clear when you think about it, but women are doing more than ever before. They are taking care of older parents. They are managing careers. They are managing teenagers. They still do the lion's share of the housework, of the driving, of the gardening. All of that stuff typically falls to women more than it does to men. Men are doing better than they were in the 1970s, but women are still trying to do the lion's share of everything. And there's a lot of pressure to keep it all together. And alcohol is a terrific antidote temporarily for anxiety. But when it becomes something that you have to have, and it becomes something that you are overdoing on a routine basis, then it becomes a problem. So I looked at that. I looked at and I also looked at how women can find help. I don't have, I'm a normal drinker myself, so I came to this as a journalist. I've covered health and medicine for many years. And I just assumed that the way people got better was through AA and through the 12-step methodology that we have been led to believe is the best way for everybody to get better. And what I found was that A, it's not that effective for most people, and B, it can be sometimes really harmful, especially for women. And so that's why it's controversial. I kind of took on a sacred cow in our society.
Yeah, I really agree. It's a much debated topic. I am privy to that on the daily on my Facebook, and it just seems there's not a lot of middle ground there. Either you're a really staunch supporter of AA, and or you're not. And you offer. I just saw some of your articles, and in one of your articles in the New York Times, you actually introduced alternatives like moderation management and the Sinclair method, which I'm familiar with. But if you could explain that to those that may not have heard of it.
Moderation management is a science-based program that teaches people who have gotten into trouble with drinking how to moderate. It's a very, very evidence-based, which means that this has been studied. This is not something that's just pulled out of the air. This is a methodology that was developed by a psychologist. She studied it over many years in a laboratory. It's been frankly studied for decades at the University of New Mexico in particular. And what it is it helps people regain control over their drinking habits. And it encourages people to stop drinking entirely for a month and then to re-examine and slowly reintroduce alcohol. It uses tools of cognitive behavioral therapy. It uses some lists, I believe, of pros and cons of, what are the advantages to over drinking? What are the advantages of maintaining control over your drinking? What are the cons of over drinking? What are the cons of maintaining control over your drinking. And that's pretty obvious. It's pretty, sometimes when you can spell it out for yourself in black and white on a piece of paper or with an app, it really makes a lot of sense, and a lot of people find it extremely helpful. However, it's important to note that...
Yeah, I agree. I think what's really important, and what you seem to be really proficient in, is showing the alternatives that are available, and just introducing new ways of thinking about drinking. Not everyone is a stone cold drunk under a bridge. I mean, it's on a continuum, just like anything else. So for different, if you're a drinker, on this line of the spectrum, these are options that might be worthwhile for you to check out.
Absolutely. And, one of the important things, Shira, and I know you, obviously I'm preaching to the choir here, but one of the important things to talk about is the new definition in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5. That's the psychiatric Bible of mental disorders. And one of the most important things to say is that the language around alcohol use and substance use, but I concentrate on alcohol, so we'll focus on that. The language around alcohol use is completely changing. Scientists and researchers don't use the word alcoholic anymore. Mm-hmm. That's not a word that's meaningful. That's a word that was given to us in popular culture, in part from Alcoholics Anonymous. Yes, as you were saying, it can mean a drunk under a bridge, but even the drunk under the bridge is not necessary. What does that mean? He's a drunk under a bridge. Mm-hmm. Well, the new term is alcohol use disorder. As you said, it's a spectrum. You can not be on the spectrum. You can be on the spectrum on the mild end. You can be on the spectrum in the middle of the spectrum. You can be on the severe end. And you can have, and what helps define that is where the number of criteria you have for meeting problems. Do you frequently overdrink the ideas you have for how much you're going to drink? Do you set limits for yourself?
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Do you set limits for yourself and blow past them all the time? Do you get in trouble with your drinking? Do you have DUIs? Do you have emotional problems as a result of your drinking? Did you do something stupid at work as a result of your drinking? Depending on the number of those you can answer, it shows you where you are in terms of severity and how you might be able to gauge what your best plan is. If you're on the severe end and you answer yes to all the criteria, you're probably not going to be a great candidate for moderation. But if you're in the middle and you answer yes to 4 questions, www.moderateDrinking.com, looking on moderation management website, that might be a good route for you.
And I'm really glad that you're explaining this, because I think so many people are stuck with all or nothing kind of mentality. Mm-hmm. So when you introduce concepts that are proven effective for some, just like AA's proven for some, it doesn't have to be so generalized. So if you have a drinking problem, sometimes that's situational. You could have lost your job and your house, but it doesn't mean that is your destiny. So just like in any other respect, you could have a financial downturn, so you're starting to turn to drinking. But as things perk up for you, then it's not so much of a problem. So we're not saying that moderation management or smart recovery or women for sobriety, there's a lot of them out there that are available, will work for everyone. But what we're trying to do, or at least what I'm not speaking for you, what I'm trying to do is just show from different perspectives what is available, because I think knowledge is power. So if you're going someplace and they're like, you are a dry drunk, or you need help and you have to come here and be one of us. That can be a little challenging and overwhelming for someone who's just really not even sure what information is available. They could have just decided, I might need to check something out.
Right.
So we're just saying, hey, here's a lot of different resources to help get you started.
Exactly, exactly. I know a woman, for example, who confessed to her doctor she was dealing with, frankly, she had post-traumatic stress disorder of a molestation that had occurred in her family. I don't need to go into all the details, but she put that on ice for a long time. It was a trauma, it was ongoing. She put it on ice. And then when she was about 50, um, and her kids were out of the house, she really kind of took it on and started drinking and self-medicating. She had changed jobs. She had a lot more free time. She cut back on her work, so she was home sometimes at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. She was bored. She started putting down a bottle of red wine a day. She told her doctor. Her doctor said, "Oh my God, you're an alcoholic. You got to go to an alcohol counselor." The counselor said, "Oh my God, you're a drunk. You have to go to AA." And just as you're saying, this was a situational issue. She wasn't an alcoholic. She was abusing alcohol. She was overusing alcohol. She needed to excavate the issues that were making her want to drink a bottle of red wine a day. But, she walked into AA and felt that she had nothing in common with those people. She didn't have, years and years of a terrible drinking history where she wronged everybody in her family. The only person, frankly, she was hurting was herself. And she ultimately found a doctor who helped medicate her anxiety and depression and is helping her with a program to drink extremely moderately. He prescribed naltrexone. He prescribes abstinence with this, but this woman occasionally, takes a drink. And in Europe, by the way, that's how naltrexone is an opioid antagonist that helps block the cravings, and it helps block the buzz of the endorphin release that you get when you drink. That's how that drug is prescribed in Europe. It's prescribed as a drinking reducer, not an abstinence drug.
Right, and in one of your articles it said that the Sinclair method, which is pretty much they use naltrexone, they claim a 78% effective rate, which is just phenomenal.
Right, and that effective rate, I've studied this very, very carefully. That comes from published studies in Finland, and what it is you take this drug an hour before you drink, and I actually ordered the drug myself. I asked my doctor. Again, I'm a normal drinker, but I was curious about this because I write about it so much. I asked my doctor to prescribe it. He refused, so I went online, like most people do, to get a 10-pack of naltrexone. And I ordered it. I took it an hour before I was going to drink. And, oh, shoot. I've got the phone ringing, sorry. There, I just took the phone off the hook. Oh my goodness.
Well, this is what happens when I get such a popular author.
So where was I?
About naltrexone in Europe.
Oh yeah. Okay. So yeah. So I took it an hour before. I took naltrexone an hour before I was planning on taking a drink, and I enjoy the little buzz that you get from a drink. I don't drink to excess. I don't like that feeling, but I enjoy that nice kind of relaxed feeling you get. And it completely took that away. It completely blocked that little buzz you get. And it was an extremely interesting experiment. And I see why there's a 78% success rate in Europe or in Finland with using it, because when you take it, it's not saying never drink. Don't drink, whatever you do, don't drink. It's saying just take this, and this will help you reduce your drinking. And it's a much kinder, gentler approach of looking at this problem. And in the clinics in Finland that use this method, people are able to reduce their drinking typically by from 80 drinks a week to 20 drinks a week to 14 drinks a week. They're able to keep it within a normal range. And to me, that's success.
No, that's a really great point. I was just talking with someone who runs a treatment center in my neck of the woods, and he was really cool because he was right on point with me about the success rates, and he just cracks up over that term, and really what we're laughing about is the mentality that surrounds that, because success is different for everyone. So really, what's the operational definition? You know, what is the collective definition that we're all working from? It means something different to me than someone else. So it really, you know, how I see it is, if your life's kind of going down the tubes and you start to get it back together, that's success. If you've gone from 50 drinks to 40 drinks, that's success. So, you know, who's in charge of this definition? I feel like it's kind of been hijacked. You know, unless you're completely abstinent, then you're not successful, or you're in denial, or, you know, there's so much like negative backlash with that.
Absolutely, and I think that's one thing that we need to help take control over and help change the language around. Who am I to say? If you know, like a source of mine who uses the Sinclair method in Finland used to drink 80 drinks a week, and now he drinks, when he drinks, no, it was 80 drinks 80 drinks well, when he drank, he didn't drink every day, but when he drank, he would routinely drink 20 drinks a pop.
Wow.
And now he drinks 5 drinks a pop. Okay, by U.S. standards, that's still binge drinking. But this guy, who's a big Finnish guy, big burly guy, you know what? He can 5 drinks for him over the course of an evening. You know what? If that works for him and he does that 2 or 3 times a month, who are we to say that's not success? That's success. The guy has his life back. And he hopes to be able to use the medication as long as he lives. And all indications show, it's a drug that's been around since the 1970s, all indications show that it's a safe drug to use for exactly that purpose.
Now, if it's been around, what's your take on this? Because I still don't understand it. If it's been around for 4 decades, why is there such a reluctance on the part of doctors to prescribe it here in America?
That is the $64,000 question. First of all, it was developed in the 1970s for use particularly for Vietnam vets who were coming back totally overloaded on heroin. And it initially developed to help reverse the effects of opioid overdoses. And then this guy, John David Sinclair, who's an American neuroscientist but worked with rats in the U.S., went to Finland where he was recruited by the Finnish government to do research regarding alcohol use. He decided if he used this drug on rats, would it also, we know that endorphins are released when we take a drink, and we know that that's a learned behavior. Because if you take a drink, you have the buzz. It's kind of like Pavlov's dogs, right? You know, the whole Pavlov's dogs, they would salivate when the guys in the white coats would come they would ring a buzzer, they'd bring food out, and they would come out in the white coats. And then the dogs would salivate, and the dogs would salivate even when the guys in the white coats came out without the food. And over time, they learned not to salivate because there was no food. So it was learned behavior, and it became unlearned. And Sinclair believed that you could unlearn the behavior of drinking if you take this drug an hour before you drink. And he started doing studies with rats in the 1980s and published studies showing that this was really effective. The rats cut down their drinking. 2 big studies came out in 1992, one at Penn, one at Yale, and the U.S. accepted or approved, the FDA approved the drug in 1994. So 20 years ago from today, 20 years ago it was approved. It was on patent only for a few years. And because of the whole notion of abstinence only, and why would you use a drug to help an addict? Addicts need to get over this themselves. This is something that is mind over matter. You use the 12 steps. We really have been kind of led to believe that that's the only way to get better. Doctors are not schooled or educated in addiction medicine. The drug became generic within a couple of years, so no drug company was making any money. You weren't seeing any, nice pharmaceutical rep in your doctor's office with a pen that said naltrexone on it. Nobody was making any money. Doctors don't know about addiction because their medical schools don't teach it. It's really a segregated system where we think, oh, addiction, the best way to treat addiction, the best way to approach addiction is with other addicts, the AA method or the NA method.
Mm-hmm.
On one hand, we say it's a disease. On the other hand, we say, oh, use this faith-based program to get better. Well, that's kind of frustrating. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. So to answer your question, there are a lot of reasons why we don't have this medication. It's been legal in this country for 20 years, but doctors don't know about it. It's generic, so nobody's making any money on selling it. And there is still the belief that if you have an addiction problem, the best way through is just to be abstinent and to be completely sober, and you don't need any aids. And that's why you've got the addiction show, and that's why we're having this conversation, because there are lots of ways to get better. And that's one way that has been shown hugely effective, but people don't know about it.
Yeah, which I just find that so hard to believe in. But I have to definitely agree that I ask a lot of doctors about certain things related to addiction and recovery. They've never heard of any of them besides AA, which I find a little scary and disheartening, because what I think it's at a loss for all of us, because if you only think that there's one way to go, and that way doesn't work for you, then what's left? There's a lot of people that says, hey, I tried, I can't do AA, I'm just doomed for failure, I guess. And
exactly.
I think it's dangerous.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And Shira, I talked to a doctor for my book who prescribes naltrexone. He's a family medicine doctor, and he works with a group called Your Empowering Solutions, a non-12-step approach in Southern California. And when he was in medical school in Southern California, in just 10 years ago, I think he graduated in 2004, his only exposure to addiction medicine was to go to AA for a week. Well, that's not medicine. That's not science, and that's not medicine. AA is a series of narratives that are the same narrative over and over of people finding these 12 steps, working the steps, and having it work for them. That's great if it works for them, but it's a story. That's a narrative. That's not science. You can't study AA. You can't use a randomly controlled double-blind trial with Alcoholics Anonymous, because people know they're in AA, and because of the anonymity aspect, you can't study it. So researchers try, they can observe, they can take surveys, but you can't actually study it itself. So we've been sold a bill of goods in this country that, frankly, needs to be dismantled.
And I really am trying to provide information for people, and I think if people are interested even slightly at getting more information, there's a real enforced backlash of it's not a proponent. Sometimes I question, what are we really fighting? Because I'm fighting, and I'm thinking, what are we really fighting for? Are we fighting for a collective recovery and well-being and health and just finding our center, or are we just fighting each other because this camp is AA and a lot of them are really enforcing their model to the deterrent of others trying to find a path that works for them. I see a lot of incongruence, and as far as my perspective with recovery, it's all about just finding yourself and your connection and living your life in a way that works for you. And if you're drinking excessively, if that's not going to work for you, and the ramifications are felt by your family and your coworkers, and we all know that. But when I see the battle between the camps, it reminds me of like the Democratic and Republicans, right before an election, how they're cutthroat with each other, and really all of us are at a loss. And when people are asking me, and I get a lot of emails, really just asking these types of questions, like what is naltrexone, or why isn't this available? And education-wise, I go to USF in the Marriage and Family Therapy program. We have one class, which is 1 credit for addiction. So since I'm the only one who knows anything about addiction, I'm the one that seems to be the infomercial for alternatives, because I mean, that carries all the way through grad school. The only thing that everybody knows is AA. So that's what they recommend.
That's pretty heartbreaking, because San Francisco is a progressive city. It's really a hotbed of harm reduction, which is another approach, as you know, reducing the negative consequences of your drinking or your drug use. And that's pretty heartbreaking that at UCSF, UCSF or USF, which either
USF. I think UCSF is more progressive, to be honest.
Really. Well, it's heartbreaking either way, because San Francisco is really, central in alternatives for everything, whether it's your lifestyle, whether it's your family situation, whether it's getting well from addictions. So that's pretty heartbreaking.
Yeah, I mean, UCSF is even doing lung transplants. They're very progressive, so I don't know what they're studying as far as addiction, but I can't imagine it as low as USF. Sorry, USF.
Shira, you're not alone. Thomas McClellan, who is a source of mine, he is a neuroscientist, former deputy drug czar. He has been studying addiction for decades. He lost a son to an overdose. He told me that as recently as 2013, there wasn't a single medical school in the United States that taught a single solitary course on addiction. By 2014, he has a program. He'd be somebody for your show if you haven't had him on already.
I know who he is. Yeah, hook me up with that email.
I go through his press person, but he founded an institute called the Treatment Research Institute, and they have worked together. They've partnered with neuroscientists from around the country doing webinars and video conferences for medical school students for kind of courselets, but it's still not a course. They're like a series of video of webinars that students can take. And I think now 40 medical schools have signed up, as opposed to 0 last year. That's quite a jump, right? But it's still not. It's a drop in the bucket, as he says.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the answer.
Yeah, I'm familiar with his story too. It was really devastating. His son just graduated college, and then I think he had an overdose, or he died that night.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, that's just the way it is right now. I was contacted by, because I love psychology, so I was contacted by a grad student doing her dissertation, I believe, at the Adler School of Professional Psychology in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really interested to see what they're doing in the Midwest. And Adler is a top-rated school for psychology. And all she knew about was AA. And I was like, how can you write a dissertation about addiction? And I asked her if she knew about smart recovery and moderation management. She never heard of this.
Oh, dear.
So that was really disheartening for me, because these are the people that, I mean, I'm just a couple years away from being out there on the front lines as a therapist, doing psychotherapy. So if I'm the only or in the minority that even knows that there are alternatives, that really scares me. But I'm doing it, and that's why I do this show, so I can not only educate people that are interested in alternatives, but the people that they're going to go to get help. They need to know.
Right.
It's like the best kept secret that there are alternatives available, and they're thriving. I'm very much a proponent of smart recovery and life ring and women for sobriety. I mean, it's really all about what works for you. And
Absolutely.
And I don't see why there's such a disconnect between, it's this way or no way.
I put it this way. I have chronic sinus problems. I've had surgeries. I have to use different drugs. I have to get these shots for, it's kind of unpleasant, but I have to get shots inside my actual sinuses to keep the swelling down. That works for me. Other people would never, ever, ever take that step because it's too scary, it's gross, whatever. You know what? That's the thing that keeps me well.
Right.
And it's a disease that's chronic. It's measurable. You can see it on a CAT scan. I have great discomfort when the chronic flares into acute, just like the other 52 million Americans who have chronic sinusitis. Everybody has a different way of getting well. And no one says to me, oh, you have to do this because that worked for me. You know what? Sinus surgery didn't work for me. Maybe it worked for Joe Schmo, but it didn't work for me because I've got other factors that are extenuating. And does everybody who has asthma have the same treatment protocol? No. It's similar. You might have a rescue inhaler and an inhaler, steroids that you take and allergy medicine that you take, but everybody has a different protocol. Do we say to a cancer patient, all right, you're going to have this kind of chemotherapy and this radiation, and you're going to have to do this and this and this. And if it doesn't work, then you fail? No, we have empathy for that person. That person deserves our empathy. But if the protocols didn't work, does that mean we give up on that person?
Exactly.
That's what happens. You were saying earlier on that if the 12 steps don't work for you, then you're seen as a failure. And it's really a cul-de-sac of an argument. Because on one hand, the big book says, this is the path that worked for us. And we acknowledge, it might not be for everybody. But then later it says, people who it doesn't work for are not being honest with themselves. Those poor, unfortunate souls. It literally says that. I don't know, it's 54, page 57 or something. And it's calling people out for being dishonest. Well, they're not honest with themselves. You know what? Maybe they're atheists, or maybe they're Jewish and they don't like the Lord's Prayer. And maybe they don't want 5 steps out of the 12 referring to God. Maybe that just doesn't work for them. And instead, they're seen as failures. And that's wrong. I mean, I'll just say it. People, I'm not afraid to be controversial. I've been at this now for a year and a half. When the book was first published, I get emails and tweets and people telling me I'm killing people for warning them, for offering alternatives. I'm killing people for offering alternatives, for educating people about other alternatives. I'm sorry, but that's not killing people. That's educating people.
Yeah, I just think the more outspoken and just the more out that we are, there's so many of us that really have a strong voice. So, but I think we definitely need more people that are have the option to be more aware of what works for them. So I don't think that is anything but the absolute right thing to do for people, to present options and to say, hey, this might work for you, try that. And if it doesn't, try this.
Right.
But during that process, it allows them to maintain their hope and to maintain their empowered self, that they are seeking something that works for them. I think there's a lot of danger in saying, well, if you don't do this, then we're going to not only judge you but label you and push you aside.
And I think another thing that's really important, Shira, is to acknowledge that men and women drink for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that women, typically, the risk factors are women. For women are anxiety disorders, depression, having had an eating disorder, and having been sexually abused. And those things in general do not make you feel like you are coming from an excess of power in the first place.
Yeah.
AA demands that you cede your power to a higher power. And people always get on my case that I don't understand it. No, I understand it. I'm not stupid. In fact, I'm pretty smart. I understand it. You're giving over control about this substance. And you're giving over, your part of the problem is that you have an excess of ego and you're listening to your addiction voice and there's a whole host of things that you're doing wrong if you don't follow this model. And there are so many people who don't want to say they're powerless. They want to have control over their drinking habits, and they can take control over their drinking habits. And it doesn't mean they're lousy people for not wanting to accept that paradigm.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you're out there, and you're right in the front, and you're always really expanding people's ideas about addiction and recovery, and how that applies to them as individuals, not as like an AA collective, so to speak.
Right. And there's one thing I just want to also talk about: harm reduction. A lot of women I know have found help through there's a group, an online group called HAMS, HAMS, Harm Reduction, Abstinence, and Moderation Support.
Mm-hmm.
And people I have found so many people who have written to me and said, you know what, this program works for me because it gives me a set of tools that I can use for addressing my own drinking. And again, I come back to the pros and cons. I think moderation management uses it. I know harm reduction models use it as well. And one woman told me, and this made perfect sense to me, one woman told me she started drinking too much during the economic downturn. She was the breadwinner in her family, and she lost her business, and it was very difficult, and she was drinking too much. And she found harm reduction online, and she realized that she was giving pleasure. She was trading pleasure for happiness, if you follow me.
Mm-hmm.
What made her happy in the evenings was cooking a gourmet meal, playing the guitar after dinner, and reading or watching whatever it was, Homeland or Mad Men or whatever it was. And when she was drinking too much, she wasn't cooking well, she wasn't playing the guitar, she wasn't reading, and she couldn't remember what she watched on TV because she was too intoxicated. And so as soon as she made that list for herself, she was able to see. She also kept a drinking diary. This was really interesting. She kept a drinking diary of how she felt after a first glass of wine, how she felt after a second glass of wine, how she felt after a third glass of wine, how she felt after a fourth glass of wine, because she used to drink 5 to 6 drinks a night. And she suddenly realized when she looked at that diary, holy crap, I am useless to myself after the third drink.
Mm-hmm.
And she was able to have this little light go on for herself that remembered the slurry handwriting, the sloppy handwriting, the less sense she was making, And these are cognitive tools that we as people can use on ourselves. They're out there. Sometimes it takes digging, but thanks to your show and others like it, more and more people are becoming educated. And I just want people not to feel hopeless. I don't want people to feel depressed. I've suffered from depression in my life. It's rotten enough to be depressed and not have an alcohol problem. Even more rotten to have depression and have an alcohol problem, because it's just going to compound the guilt. So who needs that, right? So
Right.
what we're doing is just educating people on other methods of getting better.
Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to talk with us today. How can people find your book, and how can people connect with you?
You can contact me through www.gabrielleglaser.com. That's GABRIELLEGLASER. There's a little icon there to send me an email. You can order my book on Amazon, and you can find me at Twitter at Gabrielle Glaser.
Thank you so much. I really am inspired, and you like all those other people, Kenneth Anderson, Tom Horvath, really help inspire me to continue what I do almost every Friday, which is this show.
I'm so happy that you're doing it. It's fantastic. Thanks so much for having me on, and I hope sometime we can all meet together. That'll be really fun.
Oh, that would be awesome. Thanks again. All right, everyone. You can find her book, Her Best Kept Secret, on Amazon and probably in your local bookstores. Congratulations on this. It's been well received, and it's a really intelligent take on what's going on and some of the things that we've been talking about today.
Thanks so much, Shira.
Thanks.